Hey, podcast listeners. First off, I want to thank all the new Patreon subscribers. Shout out to Bill Kafer, Gary, Zach Brasgel, Ben Hayward, Joe, and Blake Silkwood. I really appreciate your support. Podcasting isn't super expensive, but having a little nest egg for things like replacing equipment and paying for domain hosting helps keep the trains running on time. Scott Church is the owner of Category1Games.com, one of the most iconic Star Wars CCG retailers around. He's a big part of the history of the game, and he had some really interesting things to say. Hope you enjoy the interview.
Corran on the horn.
Yeah, so I was already into Magic and kind of doing it underground. I'd done sports cards. I moved from Arizona to Tennessee when I was 10, and sports cards were really big in Arizona. And I got to Tennessee, and sports cards weren't big. And so I was kind of looking for other things. So I got pretty heavy into comics at that time. And then we had a local comic shop nearby that was about 5 minutes from my house. And so they eventually started carrying Magic around like third edition. And so my little group of friends kind of got into Magic in my neighborhood. We were looking for other new games coming out. We were excited for Middle Earth, Overpower, Star Wars. They all came out nearly around the same time. I found my first box of Star Wars at Toys R Us. I opened it at a BP gas station while my mom was filling up with gas afterwards. And so that was really fun. That's what kind of got me into it. My group didn't really know how to play it. We played it like Magic, where your ability was your defense and your your power was your attack. So it's like you had this attack and defense value, and then you also drew destiny on top of it. So we're kind of doing it that way.
So it's kind of like creature rules.
Yeah, like creature rules. Yeah. And so it was funny. I went to the first event they held in Nashville. It was put on by a store called Collector's World, and it was at a mall. And we're at this event, and I'm trying to tell people this is how you play it. And they're like, no, that's not how you play it. So it was like really funny, kind of that interaction. And so A New Hope came out, and my friend that I was kind of buying it with, we were kind of splitting light side, dark side. And he was like, I don't really want this anymore. Just take my stuff. So New Hope, we kind of split. And then Hoth came out, and it seemed like the game really slowed down in our area for Hoth. And so I didn't even buy a box of Hoth to really get into it. And then Dagobah came out, and I won a marketing competition at my high school that got me a $120 gift card to the mall. And so I went to the mall, and there was a store there that carried some Star Wars and Magic. And so I bought a box of Dagobah there and opened it. I was excited that I got nearly a full set in one box. That was cool.
Right. And there's Dagobah boxes with 60 packs.
Yeah, 60 packs. Yeah, so you had 60 packs, and so you're like only a few cards short of a full set. And then Cloud City came out, and we just kept playing. Really, when things got exciting, I felt like is when like Special Edition came out. It seemed like it brought a lot of people into it. More people in our area were playing more than ever. I was in the Nashville area, just south of Nashville, called Franklin. There's a store called Outer Limits there, and they still really support all the different gaming communities, like the Cypher era communities. We'd have Jim Colson come up to events quite a lot. We had Johnny Chu would come to events, Stephen Lewis, Hayes Hunter, Clint Hayes, like Brian Ribito. We had really top-notch players coming to our, weekly events, monthly events, whatever they were at the time, and even just to come play. One of the best stories is we were waiting for Reflections 1 to come out, and my local store is like, we're not going to sell it till the street date. It was like a Monday or Tuesday, and they're like, we have it in stock. We can't sell it till Wednesday. And Brian Ribito calls a store up in Nashville, and they say, yeah, we'll sell it to you right now if you come pay cash for it. He had just got cash from his parents to pay for his college semester. And so he was going to take his money for college and buy a case of Reflections 1 with it. I guess he bought 2 cases. So we drive up to Nashville super quick. He buys these 2 cases in cash. We go back to Outer Limits, and we open them all there. It's the funniest thing. And so he's got a whole semester that he's got to tell his parents he's going somewhere. So he just went to the card shop and played Star Wars cards and Magic, Star Trek for the whole semester without even telling him that he didn't go to school. I mean, it was the funniest thing. So I still crack up about that.
What's really funny to me about that is it's Reflections 1, so it's not even like those are new cards.
Right. Yeah, but it was like, I've got to get a full set of these. I got to get that Darth Vader. I got to get that Luke. And so, I mean, that was like just such an interesting time where that was, the thing to do at that point. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I traveled a little bit for events. I went to an event in Atlanta. I'd go down to Huntsville every once in a while. I went to an event in Seattle one time when my parents did a vacation there. Anyway, so like I traveled around a little bit, but I never went to like a big event till I was older and started going to Worlds in the PC era. I've been to 3 of them. But yeah, I haven't been since about 2015 or so. I think my last one was Philly. One of them in Philly, and it was a really fun event, but I can't remember what year it was 2014 or 2015. So
was it? It must have been 2015. I want to say 2014 was the one in. I think it was like in Canada or something.
Okay,
is off the top of my head, but I can find that answer really easily.
Jedi Nightclub was the big deck for Lightside around that time. There was a Spice mining or Kessel mining, and then also like Shada, the Mistral boom start with racing. Anyways, that's kind of like some of the decks that were big around then.
So okay, so Philadelphia was 2015. So that would have been post reset, so it wouldn't have had those decks you were describing were legacy decks. Editor's note: this was actually 2010. I was able to locate the deck lists that Scott was referring to on the forums.
I played against Taco Bill first round. I remember that. I don't remember really any of my other opponents. I blitzed him first round. I mean, our game lasted less than 5 minutes. I can't remember what he did, but I was playing Darkside, and I did something that just wiped him out right away. It took us less than 5 minutes, and we're sitting there looking at each other like, well, what do we do for the next like hour and a half? Like we were done so quick. I mean, that's, I've listened to a lot of your other guests that have been on here. I haven't really heard many people talk about this. I think an interesting discussion is like play styles and how for people that play fast versus people that play slow. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, if you play against Kevin Shannon thinks everything out and he takes a long time to play. So like if I'm not mistaken, he went time a decent amount in his playing career. Mm. So like for me, I like to play fast. So I know like in chess, they have like a fast play chess, and the people that win that are different than people that win longer game chess. Right. I'm blitzing the names there. I apologize to chess fans out there, but I kind of wonder if we did a look at that with Star Wars, what the difference would be in play styles in players that are more fast players versus slow players. That's something I've always thought about.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't run into this recently, but there was a stretch where I would get a little frustrated because I was playing a lot faster than my opponent, and I would end up going to time a lot just because I think it was just because of like where I was like in kind of the bottom, like not all the way at the bottom bottom of the but like just like the bottom third ish. And like there were a couple in 2019 there were at Nationals there were a couple of games where like we went to time, and there was one of them in particular that we went to time. My opponent like had the momentum. Like if we'd have had another 15 minutes, he would have won the game.
Sure.
And I ended up winning by like 2 cards. But he probably took 45 minutes of the timer on his decisions.
Right.
Like it was kind of ridiculous. And that's one good thing about GEMP is you have your GEMP, you have your clocks on there so that it keeps people at least a little bit honest. But yeah.
So here's another funny story. So I lived in Tennessee, and I came out to Utah for school, and there was 2 card shops right next to each other. I mean, seriously, like you went across the street and like 3 stores down, and there was just 2 shops right there. And so one was holding a Star Wars tournament, one was holding a Star Trek tournament. And this is right after Special Edition had come out. So I'm going to play in both of them. The Star Trek started an hour earlier, so I'm playing that first, and then I go over and do the Star Wars one. I was just running back and forth between the stores to play these games. And the Star Wars one, I'm running Operatives, and no one in the store had seen Operatives yet. It's after Special Edition come out. I mean, I'm playing against a guy playing Mind What You Have Learned without the objective. He's trying to train on Dagobah without the objective for it. And I'm like, hey, there's an objective that like gets us going and sets us up for you. And he's like, I've never seen it, and I'm like, oh, so I show it to him. He's like, oh, that would be helpful if I had started with this. I'm like, yeah. So I'm just crushing people with Operatives, and none of us seen it. Each one of them has to I have to explain the rules of how Operatives work. And so I'm beating everyone so badly in the Star Wars tournament. I'm like, hey, can you just give me a bye so I can go do the Star Trek and finish it up? I'm like in the finals there. So I go and like play that, win there, come back over, play the final in Star Wars, win that. I mean, it's really interesting going Tennessee. I was kind of a scrub younger player. And then I got to Utah and I'm like, people aren't very good here at these games. Like, why not? Like, it was really interesting, the location difference where like in the South, like, even Huntsville and Atlanta, it's very competitive, but Utah was like years behind where the game was at that point. It was really interesting to see. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, especially anyways. If you're talking about that's, Decipher era. So that's like, it's the internet's around, but it's not quite the same. Yeah. I definitely know what you're know what you're getting out there. Like even in the PC era, I always used to joke that the further west I played, the better I did.
Yeah.
Now there's always that only goes so far, but like when I would play, and I did not do very well in those games, but if I could go all the way out to Illinois, then then I'd like win a couple of games. But if I went to the East Coast, then like you're playing against the top players, and lose all my games.
There's an interesting dynamic there where in the Northeast, I mean, there's so many more players of card games in general, just because it's colder longer. So you have much more of people staying inside, indoors, not doing outdoors things. So out West, the demographics are just much different. And so, I was talking to Matt Manning about this, Board Matt on his podcast, and saying that, and he was like, really? I didn't realize that. But if you look at like, even for our Star Wars base of players, the Northeast still has, Midwest, Northeast still has such a higher player base still today than anywhere else in the U.S. It's really fascinating. And I mean, probably the same thing could be said for European countries that are a little colder than those that aren't,
Mm-hmm,
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So one thing that I've so you are one of a handful of people that like has been around. I feel like has been around the whole time, and you got your website, Category 1 Games, which go to like a lot of people will ask like, where do you go to for pricing, for like the official pricing on stuff, and Category 1 Games is, to me, is like you until Brian Fred opened up his store, yours is sort of the default to me, or maybe was like I think back in the day, like I kind of thought of you like you're going to be a little bit more expensive than eBay prices because you're a store, but it's a good it's a good place to start. Or like Tom Hade sold, he has a brick and mortar store in Washington D.C., and he sold Star Wars cards in like 2014 at the store, and he said we just use Category 1 game prices. So first of all, so the first thing is like I feel like you had some like interesting like rarities, and one thing is like you had a lot of Reflections gold cards. How did you get all the Reflections gold cards?
So that's a good story. So the person that had them, that I bought them from, he got them from a former Decipher employee. And I know of a few Decipher employees that he was close to, but he's never revealed to me who it was. And he said he had 2 full sets of Reflections Gold. This person did. He had a friend over at his house. The friend, they were drinking, got intoxicated, and peed in his house on his bookshelf where those cards were located, and peed on the box of Reflections Gold, destroying 1.5 sets.
Oh, wow.
I'm not crapping you here. This is what happened. What he had left was the episodes 4 through 6 and some episode 1 cards, and that was it. The rest of them were destroyed from urination. So he gave some of those out. He sent some of them to Europe for a few events for prizes. He sent some of them to Endor region for prizes. These were mainly episode 1 cards. And then episode 4 through 6, he sold me the vast majority of them, and then he put the rest on eBay. And I bought them all off of eBay when they went to auction. And at that time, I mean, they sold for $40 to $60, $40 to $80, depending on what they were. You know, and not nearly what they are now, the crazy amount that the collectors are paying now for them. You know, and I put them on my site. I had them, you know, somewhere between like 99 to maybe 150, depending on the character, or maybe 80 to 150. And I'd sell some of them here and there. I had one guy that actually bought a Vader, and he bought one other one. I can't remember which. And I took pictures of it because I felt like it was a sketchy transaction. He bought them off of eBay. Mm-hmm. He then returned them to me and said, "These aren't the cards I remember from playing Star Wars CCG of Darth Vader. I'll just take a refund." So he thought he was looking for Premier Vader, and that wasn't it, you know. So it kind of cracks me up that this was like out of my hands for a little bit, and then came back, and what a silly way.
Well, so and also I mean they're playtesting cards, right? So I could see how if you didn't know what you were getting, you'd receive it and you think it's a counterfeit or something. Right. Yeah, and you know, and kind of being in this community of knowing that I'm kind of a middleman reseller. I've had a lot of, you know, former Decipher employees contact me, and so I've gotten a few like preview cards along the way. You know, I sold off our inventory to the Players Committee in 2016 in June, and there's a binder I had of all the leftover Reflections Gold, and I mean it was probably 100 cards of it. They said it was never part of what they received, and so you know I've always been curious where that ended up. If that's like a lost thing that the PCs held onto, and they don't want to tell the community they actually have it because of like, you know, I don't know why. But or did it really go missing? And if it went missing, that's really a shame because that's, you know, a part of the history of the game that's just lost. Another editor's note for you. I did reach out to Scott Lingrell on this, and he confirmed that the delivery service opened the parcel while it was on the floor, and the binder of Reflections Gold cards was missing when the PC received the item. So the assumption was that that the Reflections Gold cards were stolen in shipment, which really stinks because whoever found it probably didn't know what they had. Mm-hmm. When I did have it up for sale, Warren Holland contacted me. He wanted to know who I got it from. He wanted to put like legal action against the person. I mean, this was 2015, 2016. Uh-huh. So if you figure the game ended in 2001, you know, how is he really legally going after anyone at that point? You know, all he's going to be able to do is really send him an email and say, "I'm mad at you for letting these out in the open." You know, it's kind of ridiculous. And so I kind of said to him like, "Hey, like, this isn't illegal for me to sell this. If you have problems with it, you know, we can get lawyers involved, but I'm probably going to leave these up." And he was like, "I thought this just could be friendly." And I was like, "All right, well, we can stay friendly." And I took him down for like about 2 months. And then I think I was in contact with the PC around that time about buying me out. And I kind of left them off and just gave them to the PC. But yeah, I mean, it was, for me, that was an interesting time. And I miss having them, and I'm sad that if they're missing for real, that's really a shame because that is a part of the history of the game.
I'm glad that more of the promo cards have shown up. It seems like people have provided more promo cards. Like there's a few Hoth ones, like with the Blizzard Walkers and things that have kind of shown up over the past few years that are cool to see, like Anakin's lightsaber and whatnot too. But yeah, I'm kind of bummed that those are gone. I'm like, man, I should have just held on to the binder that had them. The PC didn't really care to have it to begin with. It wasn't part of our deal. And I was just like, here, have these. I don't think I'm going to deal with this again. Mm-hmm. I thought once I sold my stuff to the players committee that I'd eventually just wrap up category 1 games and move on to something else. And that completely flipped, where I was like, why don't I just build category 1 games up into something even bigger and get more and more involved with these out of print games? So that's what I did. And it's been very successful doing that. So I'm glad I have. And I'm glad to add Star Wars back this year. It's been really nice to have it back. It's interesting. I had talked to Brian Fred and was like, there's an open space for, someone to take my shoe, fill the void that I left. And I think there's a few sites that have popped up. And I said to Brian the other day, I was like, there's 11 sites I see right now that are carrying Star Wars CCG online. I guess 12 if you include the players committee's store as well. And I was like, out of the 12 stores, I don't know how many are actively restocking and bringing in new stock that are looking at prices and readjusting. I'm like, I know I am. I'm pretty heavily involved with this. I mean, just this past, like yesterday, I just completed 3 buy orders for the game. And so we're constantly getting in new stock. It's constantly selling out. I mean, I kind of joke that I'm rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic with this. It's just coming and going. It's just moving, and I can't ever get ahead of it because it's always just changing. So, I mean, it's been really nice to have back on the site and be involved with it again. I missed it. I hit a point where I missed the game, and I was really burnt out there. So, like, I didn't think I'd get to that point, but I'm glad to be here. So,
yeah. Well, the game's a lot. I will tell you, the game. I don't know how much you've been playing of late, but the game's a lot. Is probably. I mean, we complain about the meta sometimes, but legitimately, I think that the game is probably as good or better than it's ever been, because, frankly, Decipher only formats they are what they are.
Right.
They're not like, I mean, they're not balanced. They're not, you're always going to run into the sort of decks that are doing things that are not, that are not fun. Or like a deck that is dominant in a format. Like I love Watch Your Step, but if you play Premier Reflections 2, that's the only light side deck. We did a league event a year or so ago, and almost every game was won by a light side Watch Your Step deck. Like, I think all of us, there were 8 of us in the event. All of us, the only light side decks we played were Watch Your Step. And I think like 1 or 2 dark side decks that was correctly tuned to defeat Watch Your Step actually won some games, but it was and then the Legacy era had a lot of cool stuff, but also a lot of cards that had 5,000 words on a card and card bloat and interactions that were unintended and stuff. Now I feel like the game is much more balanced, and it's more focused. Like some some people don't like Mark Walseth doesn't like that it's so focused around like the basics of like battling and battling and force draining and things and if there's a negative play experience, they'll just errata or they'll shield it, but it really does. I mean, it makes it so you can play the game every day. Plus, we have Gemp,
right?
Which is amazing.
I mean, it's funny to me because like Gemp for me, like I was the first one that posted. Like when Gemp came out for Star Wars, I was the first one that posted videos on YouTube for Gemp. In fact, my old videos of me playing Gemp 5-6 years ago are still some of my best viewed videos today. And Gemp has had a lot of updates since then, obviously.
Yeah.
I'll play all the Jedi sealed events on there. I enjoy that format. But I mean, that format kind of sucks because if you get a bad group of cards, it's just not even worth playing. Mm-hmm. You're only going to play if you pull some rares that are actually worth it. Yeah. Same with the EPP sealed is pretty fun. And I like the sealed event where you get it's like the starter cards for different deck styles, and you put 2 of them together, and that forms your deck. So I've enjoyed. I can't remember what that format's called. You probably know better than I do.
I don't really do very much with the with the alt formats. I'm
it's
one
a pretty
of the
cool
Jawa
one.
people. I'm one of the Jawa bosses, and and I do open, but yeah, I don't really mess with sealed that much.
So that one it gives you current deck styles and puts them together. So like that's how I've seen more of the current deck stuff is kind of in that format. I got into it probably a year or so ago. There was a Darth Vader or a Hunt Down deck that was really good that I think Chew had played at an event that everybody was talking about, and I built that deck and thought that was fun to play as. But as I was playing against Lightside, they have it's the Millennium Falcon start where you're trying to get Falcon off the pile of junk or whatever that is. And there was another one that could do like 2 direct damage right away from Lightside if they pick up based off a Rogue One. And those type of decks, I was kind of like, it just wasn't really fun to play against as someone coming back that understood how Hunt Down plays. And even though it's a different style, I understood how to make it work. But playing against that Lightside, I was like, there's so many different ways to cancel Destiny, reduce Destiny, do these different things that I was like, it kind of took the fun away from it. And I was like, I don't know how to play against these decks. And as a new person coming back, or a returning person coming back, I was like, I don't want to have to figure this out. I'll just go back to my sealed events where I know what all the cards do and how to play them.
Well, if No Idea was still doing 2 damage at the time, that was quite a while ago.
I think it was like a year and a half ago, 2 years maybe.
Yeah, it would have been, because I'm pretty sure No Idea stopped doing 2 damage in or with the tweak set. I'm pretty sure, which would have been, I think, 2020.
So every about 5 to 7 years, it seems like there's a reset. What you're more involved in the community than I am as far as playing goes. What does that look like from the community? Are they looking for a reset? Like, because we're at that 5 to 7 year mark, and we've got bloat to a certain degree. I know they're releasing smaller sets and they're tweaking them as they go along. So there's kind of a fixing it as it goes. But are they looking at all at that, or rotation, or anything along those lines?
I don't think rotations is really a possibility. Although that's personally what I want is not rotation but retirement. Just like be like, oh, that's a, like every however many years, just say, these cards are gone now.
Out of the meta, right? Or like out of
the meta. Yeah. Like, because sometimes they've made changes to cards like that. It was like, this isn't a big enough change to justify like errata, but also this card has kind of been a little bit too good for too long. Like Honda Baba Virtual is like kind of the biggest culprit in my mind of this. When he's with a smuggler, he adds an attrition destiny, and he does some other stuff. Before, he added 2 to that attrition destiny if he was with your smuggler. And now he doesn't add 2 to the attrition destiny. And I was just like, well, then why not just blank him and then design a new card that does that? That's like your kind of your closest thing to rotation. I mean, every 6 months or so, there's a discussion about a reset that pops up in the community. But honestly, I think that the constant tweaks. I mean, there's to me, there's errata creep where, you have to make sure that the cards that are in your deck from 6 months ago still do what they said they do, or if you're looking at a deck list from a year ago, half those cards don't do what they say they're gonna. That's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. But that does keep it from getting out of hand to the point where you need to just start from scratch. And I think there's a real resistance to starting from scratch. And I mean, we still have, if you're talking about card bloat, it's not nearly as bad as it was in Legacy. I mean, we probably have half the cards we had in Legacy.
Right.
Just the decks are the sets are a little bit smaller. They're a little bit less frequent. And the cards are I feel like there's more thought put into, not that there wasn't thought before, but there's more thought put into whether when a card gets designed, and sometimes those cards are just like not good enough and they don't see play, but it's not usually a card like does something weird and then 5 sets later another card gets designed and then they have a weird interaction. Like when cards are broken now, I feel like it's just because they push the power creep, 10% too far,
right,
or something. So it's there's definitely there's a lot of care put into the design process, and I don't want to just be a cheerleader for the PC. We just had a tweak set that I was pretty critical of. But as far as a reset, I don't think we're there, and also like. The other thing that you don't really think about with the time of the reset, the issue was that the community had shrunk, that people had left the game because they were so frustrated with the format. And I would say, based on my experience, we have a thriving community in the Ohio Midwest. We had 13 people at our regional this past year, and I mean, I feel like and then, Nationals has about 40 people, Worlds has about 60 people, and that's kind of stayed consistent for the last couple of years. Gemp has grown immensely. I think it leveled off a little bit. I don't know how much it's grown since then, but people complain about everything, definitely.
Right.
But I don't think we're at that. We're at that point yet. And if we are at that, and if we do get to that point, I mean, reset will be 10 years ago in before you know it. So, if we get to that point, and there's 100 people on playtesting, and there's not that they all participate, but there's a great group in design and there's a great group in playtesting that are, that I'm sure that if we got to that point, there would be some people that would, that would know what a good format like that does. And I mean, Jawa format, I don't know if how familiar you are with that, but that's the format that I'm on the Jawa Council. We jokingly created it years ago, and then it like stuck. We look at the most recent tournaments and we say those 5 decks you can't play. And so it has the effect of, we cut off the tip of the mountain, and that opens up the meta to being able to play just like whatever you want.
To some degree, it's almost like making it a pauper way of playing Star Wars CCG, whereas like with Magic, it's taking away the rares, but in this, it's taking away like the power decks.
Yeah, it's like Pauper if Pauper wasn't Pauper. It's like, I would say it's more like, using Magic terms, it would be like something more like actually, well, maybe like Commander, or maybe like multiplayer, or maybe like just something that kind of lets you. It a lot of times makes your pet deck playable. Also, just and this is where it's like Commander. There is a mindset when we have Jawa events that people are usually not taking it quite as seriously, and the meta isn't quite as solved. So
it's more fun.
So people are just playing the decks that they want to play. We do the Jawa Brawl every year that has achievements and things, and
So here's something that I think is interesting coming back into it. I've seen there's definitely a divide, if you will, or a difference between those like myself that have been with the game for a long time, been part of the PC for a long time. I took a break, but I kind of back in the community. But then there's a whole group of new people that have come back over just the past 3 years, 2020 forward, right? So like you've got Board Matt, you've got Darth Grader, you've got on Twitter the Star Wars CCG Twitter page that is not affiliated with the
Miles
Players
Greb,
Committee. Miles. You've got kind of a newer group of people interested in the game and creating content for the game that are not part of that old guard that were not there for a long time. They're kind of coming in and they might have different interests in it. So like, Darth Grader, he's into graded cards, and there's a whole subgroup of people that are only into graded cards. There's people that are only interested in, there's an Alderaan Twitter page that's like this group of Californians that are just doing their own events and creating their own cards that's separate from the PC. So like, it's interesting to kind of see the old guard and then kind of a new guard coming in of different, and they're much more like content creators than what PC kind of was. I'd say the PC is, what they're doing now versus 6 years ago, and the organizational structure of it is immensely better now. Like you said, testing has this many people. The people in charge of the different areas are doing so much more work, and the donations and how you can get all these cool prizes, the poker chips and so on. That wasn't there 6 years ago like it is now. And so the PC's really stepped up, but there's a whole group of content creators that are separate from the PC kind of doing their own things. Do you see much of a divide in that, and kind of do you hear much from the older guard, what they feel about it or think about it?
Well, Board Matt and I both won Content Creator of the Year this past year.
Yeah.
So we're very aware of that. I think that there are some people who, for me, it's all about the Facebook page. This is where, even though the Facebook page is a horrible place, this is the place that Decipher employees, like core open OG players, and the weird collector people, that new group that you're referring to, that I think your experience at least has been, a lot of them are more on the collector side of things. This is where all those groups kind of come together.
Merge. Yeah.
Along with a bunch of internet trolls and people who found a garbage bag full of uncommons in their basement.
Hey, do you think Decipher will reprint the game, guys?
Right.
What do you think?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the place where kind of all of us intermingle. And I think that there's, Board Matt had the Jane App, the marketing advocate, on his show recently, and so he's definitely, then you've got, and then the guy that I play with weekly, I met him on the Facebook group. Also a guy that I'm working on a Star Wars CCG themed concept album sort of EP thing.
That's fun.
And I met him on the Facebook group too. I think the people who are like, and I think there's a few other people who I've gotten to come out to events and things. And Board Matt, I think, came to, I want to say he played in the retro event at Worlds in 2021. So
cool.
He's not, and Andy Talaga is another guy that's creating content with him. He's on the Slack, which is the most smoke-filled rooms old guard group is on the PC Slack. Anybody can get on it, by the way. It's not like it's invite only, but that just happens to be, because we're all old, so we're on Slack. All the young people are on Discord. So there's definitely, but there's also, you can bring, like, I am all about like trying to bring some of those people who are in that outside group in. There are other people who I don't think it's controversial to say that there are some of them that are not great, like Miles Greb, the guy that runs the Star Wars CCG, the bootleg Twitter account. He's pretty horrible. And that's not I don't think that's a controversial thing for me to say. But I
think that's what's hard, is because, like, I've had good experiences with Miles. Like, he posted something to mine at one point where he was like, "Look at this," and I was like, "Hey, that's mine. Like, you should post like where you got it from." And he was like, "Oh, sorry about that." Like, so Miles and I are good, and I think that's what's tough is, like, I still go to the PC's forums. To me, that's the old school way of even doing it too, is the forums. I talked to Board Matt. He's like, I've never been there.
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of interesting where
I think
you have
the Slack has kind of replaced the forums mostly.
Okay. See, I've never even been on. I've never been on Slack, so I've never had a job where I've had to be on it, so I've never been on it.
Yeah.
So like, to me, like the forums is kind of like the old school way. Facebook was like kind of the newer. Now you've got, what was the other site you mentioned? I just joined it the other day and got on Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I got on it. I was like, whatever, like I'm on there. People want to reach out, they can. But like, it's just really interesting to kind of see that, it's almost like, it's like watching basketball where you have Charles Barkley and Shaq, where they're like, oh, these guys aren't playing it like how we played it. Like Steph Curry couldn't compete today. Or with our group, and so it's almost like it's kind of fun to me to watch, where I'm like, there's definitely a divide of like whose interests or what, where Miles might have a different interest of what he's trying to accomplish with what he's doing.
The problem is when Miles is watching a live stream and goes into a tirade about how horrible the PC volunteers are. Or when that's rough. I gave him, because you said you had one interaction with him where he kind of did something that was out of line and you talked to him and he apologized. He did that to me over and over and over, and I tried to engage with him over and over again. I mean, I posted my first episode of Bad Deck Breakdowns, and because it had a picture of the Legend objective themed after Last Jedi. He made a disparaging comment about the podcast,
right?
And without having listened to the podcast, just because he's because of the image, and he did that over and over and over again, to the point where he was bad mouthing PC volunteers from the Facebook group and got temporarily banned from it. He just, so you have people like that, and then you have to be careful not to lump everybody in with that one guy, or there are on GEMP, there are a very small number of people who play casual tables and get mad at you because you played a competitive deck, or get mad at you because you denied a revert or something, and go crazy in the GEMP chat. Because that's, if you think the Facebook group can get bad, the GEMP chat has no moderation.
Right.
So you have like these small groups of people, and you just have to, I think that as somebody who is kind of trying to be outreach and trying to grow, because to me, the open format, the new cards, I hate when people talk about the game in the past tense. The game was so great. I think the game is better now than it's ever been. The product itself and events, I wish we could have 100 people at Worlds, not just 60 people at Worlds. I just want to grow. And I do think that there are people, Heisenberg, I don't even know his real name because I just know his GEMP name. Daniel something just got second place at San Diego Super Open or whatever they called it. Second place in a major. For years, he did nothing but play on GEMP and like not say good game at the end of the game. Like he was just silent. And I think that was because he had a bad internet connection. But he has stepped into the game. James Martin, who is another guy that got his start. I don't know if he got his start. I interviewed him, but it was a long time ago. But he's the real Twitter guy now. He runs the real Star Wars CCG Twitter at SWCCG, and he got his, he kind of came in from the GEMP, like the GEMP exclusive world. And like I said, there've been people. I think that, I think Matt is a great example of somebody who is, kind of came from something that's not, he's not in the old guard, but he is, he's doing, and you've got Masashi Training Temple on YouTube, who he's kind of a relatively a what we would call a narp. He's a narp. He's a returning player, but he kind of came back and joined up with the old guard. My buddy Carl is another guy that's he got his start last year, or a little before last year, and started coming to events and everything. So it's growing from in a lot of different places, and I think it's good to embrace stuff. And I mean, if people want to, the fact of the matter is, like, if people just want to play sealed or they just want to play Decipher formats, I'm probably not going to interact with them as much. But I don't necessarily have a problem with them. I have a problem if they want to start something, if they want to say, if they want to make like inflammatory statements about volunteers, or if they, even if they're like overly, if they want to engage about, the pros and cons of defensive shields, then as long as I have the energy for it, I'll.
Oh man, defensive shields. That's a good one. It's funny to me, like, still people have the hatred for like episode 1 or, Legacy, it's kind of like, I just don't get the, like, I didn't really care for episode 1. I didn't really care for episode 7 and 9, but I'm not going to like thrash on people for playing a card game that enjoy that. Right. Like that's right. And if you enjoyed it, good. I mean, it's funny watching like my daughter who's 14, she's gone back and watched episode 1, 2, and 3. And she really enjoys those because she watched Clone Wars growing up. So like the droids are fun to her, and she doesn't have that, she hasn't put 4, 5, and 6 on this pedestal like many of us have. Yeah. So 1, 2, and 3 are enjoyable for her, and I think there's a whole new generation of kids that will find that, and probably will maybe find that with episodes 7, 8, and 9 one day too. So I mean, I think everybody should be able to enjoy their fandom in that how they like, and if you don't like it, that's fine. I can say I don't like it, but I'm not going to say like you're dumb for liking it. You should be able to like it. If you like it, enjoy the heck out of it, man. Like I think that's the thing with that, so hopefully those that have that frustration don't lump everybody in with a negative connotation with it, So
and I think that's it's important to think critically about that kind of stuff. There's probably some jerks in the old guard too.
Right. Yeah. I don't think there was anyone ever banned in the old guard. Oh wait, there were. There's some great stories and all that, but I mean,
I think it's what I always think is funny, and this hasn't happened that many times, but like, we all used to be a little more abrasive on the internet, so there will be somebody who's been kind of away for a long time, and then they kind of come back guns a-blazing, and and you're like, we don't talk like that anymore.
Before the PC forums came about, everybody was on decktech.net. I mean, that's where everybody used to congregate and kind of talk Star Wars. Neil that runs that, I mean, he had people contact him and say, hey, can you go through and delete my profile and anything I ever said? Because I'm going for a job interview and I don't want them to be able to find this on me if they search the internet for me. So like you're saying, like people just throw out stuff. Man, Deck Tech was a hive of crazy crap on there that, if you didn't want your kind of like past being shown, I mean, it's almost like one of those like, hey, once you hit 21, everything should be erased online about your identity before, so it doesn't ruin your future, right? Like that's kind of how Deck Tech was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was on Deck Tech a little bit. I was mostly on Game Players Network, and then, and then hopped over to the PC forums. So I wanted to ask you this, somebody that's been around the whole time, especially since you since you sold off the collection and went out and went back in. Do you ever like find your like gut that like this card should be worth $5 and it's worth like $30? Oh
man. So many times. And there's cards too that were virtualized that I like still look at. I'm like, why isn't this more like Let the Wookiee Win, right? Mm-hmm. For a while there, that was like a $20 card, I want to say, because it was a key card in the meta. And, it's been nuked and doesn't have any real value again to it.
Right.
Well, so there's definitely
virtualized. It's been virtualized again. It's playable, but it's not, you used to need 5 copies in every deck.
Right. Yeah. Like, I kind of joked there was one day where my phone was blowing up. This is a long time ago. My old phone was blowing up because I was getting messages saying that I had orders, and I looked to see what the orders were, and they were all Mara Jades being sold. And I was like, that's weird. What happened? So then I go to the Players Committee site, and I see it was like the release of the V set where she was virtualized for the first time. And so also, it was really interesting to see for a while there how the market was impacted so much by what was virtualized and what wasn't, and so it was almost like if you could get the play test release of what cards are going to be virtualized, you could kind of like influence the market in some way, and there's kind of cheesy stuff like that if you really look at it, but like in the long run, that's kind of dumb. But I mean, for sure, like it was really interesting to see Mara Jade jump in that instance. Like, yeah, but there's definitely cards I look at it and I'm like, why isn't this more? But I mean, the market's in an interesting state where it's definitely dropping, and cards will drop depending on what decks are played too. But like, They Must Never Again Leave the City, and I think is one that has dropped significantly here over the past year or so. I repriced cards probably last November, knowing in January I'd start selling them. And it's fascinating to look at what's gone up and what's gone down. For example, that's one that's really gone down. Whereas like enhanced Premier or enhanced Leia with gun and Han with gun have both gone up a lot. And I'm like, there's so many of these. Why are these going up? Is it like playable again? Like what's happening here that this is hot? And I get them in. I have like a set price that I think is really fair right now. And they come in and they sell out instantly. So it's really interesting to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that I thought They Must Never Again Leave the City was going to be super cheap. It's still pretty expensive.
I want to say it was like close to like 80 or 100 now. I can't remember what it's
yeah.
I think it's like what 40 or 60 now.
Yeah. I'm being a jerk and pulling it up on Brian Fred's site. But yeah, he's got it for 40. But in my mind it should be like 10.
Right.
Cuz I need 3 more copies.
Yeah. That's funny.
Cuz I not that it's playable, it's just a I guess it's just that if people want it, they need 4 copies of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I noticed that with Han and
so
Leia too.
He's got it at 40. I've got it at 24.29.
Oh, okay.
So like I said, I just updated prices for this like started January here. So my pricing is like spot on with where the market's at right now. I talked to Brian. I know he told me when he last repriced things, so I don't want to spoil that. So I won't say it on here. But like the market has definitely shifted, and I mean this is across the board. All I've repriced probably about 70% of our inventory on our site, and it's all gone down. I mean the majority of card games right now have lost the COVID bump. They're down where like something like that was probably like $40 to $60 is now $25. Like commons and uncommons that were 25 cents to 50 cents are now 20 cents, or even less. Anyways, like it's really interesting to see like kind of market wise where all these different card games are at.
See the problem, I would buy from your store, but the problem is, or I would pick this up right now, but the problem is, the only reason I was going to buy from Brian Fred's store is that I'm going to be at his house this weekend. so I wouldn't have to pay shipping. But
that's awesome.
But anyway, but no, I noticed that with Han and Leia as well, because they're not. I mean, especially Han is not playable. Like
right,
like you solo is the go-to. I'm thinking it's just that people are trying to make. I think it's a collector's thing where people are trying to get the complete set. Leia is playable. I play her in my. There's good in him, but like there's a million different versions of Leia, and usually she's not the best.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't think at least right now I don't think that the prices are that much based on playability. I think that it's I think there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of collectors out there who either don't play or barely play, or like they play, but like if you play, you need, one. There's also like the type of person who's like, I need to build 8 decks, and each of them needs 3 copies of We Must Accelerate Our Plans. So I'm gonna buy 24 copies of this $80 card.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to me because Star Wars CCG is a little different than some of these other games, right? So like, even if you wanted to have multiple decks built, you're probably going to have 5 at most of light side, dark side, if that. I mean, there's probably like 2 to 3 that are like tier 1.
Right.
Whereas like take Verse System, WWE Raw Deal, where you have all these wrestlers, or Verse System where it's Marvel DC Verse. People have like 40 decks that they just have put together around these different build types, and then they just have them where friends come over, they say grab a deck, and we randomly just grab them and play. And so it's a different style where we sell a lot of like these different games where you can build multiple decks, whereas Star Wars definitely has the collector base that I think impacts it a lot. But the player base, once you kind of have what you need, you're going to basically reuse it a lot more than you are buying multiples. Right. I mean, here's another one that is definitely influenced by collectors, like Boba Fett. We have it at $16. And why Cloud City Fett, unless it's been virtualized to something that I don't know, really shouldn't be that high.
Yeah, then he's playable. You play him in carbon chamber testing and stuff, but yeah, I mean it's still a Cloud City card.
Right. Yeah. So it's 16 and like special editions 13. And we sell out of them as soon as they come in. Right. Like there was one point during the 2021 where someone bought every card I had that had Venom, Carnage, or Wolverine on it. They just bought me out of these cards that are like 20-cent cards, but they're like, oh, this is going to spike. And so there's definitely a collector, kind of mentality with that sort of stuff where they're like hoarding it to, eventually have the prices go up as well. So it's kind of an interesting aspect to all of this.
Grading is the other thing that always is
right.
I think it's insane that people are grading these Star Wars cards. It's like, no, we need them to be played with.
Right. I get the aspect of it. There's things like where you're like, oh, this is going to stay with me forever. So I want it just slabbed to like have on my shelf and I'm not going to play again. Mm-hmm. Right. Like if that's kind of your mentality, I think it's great. There are cards where I'm like, why are you getting that graded? Because even if it's graded at 10, who's going to pay much for it? Like the R2 from Reflections 1, who's really like, I need that in a 10, who, what, why?
Yeah. I mean, and I guess that's, that's the difference. Like for me, like I've recently embraced playing with proxies, but for a long time I was very anti-proxy, not because I didn't want to play with cards that I didn't own, but because I wanted to play with the cards that I did own. So like somebody would say, well, I have, why on earth would you pay all this money and to buy a Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight and then just play with it in a deck? And I'm like, why would you pay all that money and then not play with it? Like, right. Like you're not even getting the basic function out of it. You're just having it to have it. And that's, I don't know. That's, again, like we said at the beginning, I'm more of a consumer than a collector. I guess is where I would say, and I remember you I listened to the first half of your interview with Matt, and you talked about your neighbor who was slabbing cheap Wolverine and Venom comics.
Yeah.
My podcast, my comic book podcast co-host, has been known to, he will pay $30 for a CGC graded like random comic issue. Now, $30, that's a magic number. That's how much it costs to get something graded. So basically he's getting the thing for free.
Right.
Or for the cost. So, which I think that's kind of interesting, but also, and he likes that stuff, but it just doesn't, grading. I also just like when I want like old comics, I want like the most beat up version that you can get. Like I think that gives it character. I have a what's it Outer Rim Scout that went through the washing machine. And I have thought about getting that graded just to see what would happen.
Well, I know someone in Arizona that collects Outer Rim Scouts. He'll buy all of them from you, even washed ones. No kidding. Yeah. No, it's interesting, that whole collector's aspect. We're starting to see that a little bit in the Star Trek group, and for the most part, it seems like they're really against the idea of graded cards. And then WWE, I had someone approach me recently where they had a few graded cards, and they're like, what would these even sell for? And I'm like, I don't even know. No one talks about it or is bringing it up. So I think there's like sometimes a slow movement towards that. Sometimes it takes a long time for approval of it, kind of from like the community. It's really an interesting thing. I guess because I've been in comics and sports cards before as well, it doesn't really impact me at all. I stay away from it for the most part myself, just because I'm like, to me, like, I like game cards. Like, I collected sports cards, and I was like, these sit here and they don't do anything, but they sit in a binder. Okay, cool. But like comics I could read, or, gaming cards I could play. There was like an alternative use to it besides just looking cool. And so that's, to me, like, slabbing is kind of just making it look cool again. Mm-hmm. So
then
anyways,
again, I guess, like, yeah, I'm using these cards to play, but there's like 2,000 unique cards, and I have 40,000 cards in my collection.
Right?
Maybe not all those are getting used to their fullest potential.
Right.
Oh man, I envy the people who have like 4,000 cards or 5,000 cards, and that's their whole collection. But they have like every playable, like the perfect number of every playable to be able to build any deck. That's pretty cool.
I basically took my collection and it went into the inventory of Category 1 games. And so there was one point when I was still playing where I was like, I'm going to set aside these playable cards. They're going to sit in their own binder. They're going to be pre-sleeved, light sides, white backs, and dark sides, black backs. And this is all my playable stuff, and it won't hit inventory. And I did that for a few years, and then I was kind of like, I eventually just dumped it all back into inventory. So like for now, like, any game I want to play, I don't have anything I can even pull out and play. Like, there's one point even that I had sets of everything Star Wars related that I just put it into inventory eventually. The only thing I've collected myself still is I have a full set run of Middle Earth from Ice from the 90s game. I think the cards just look beautiful and cool, and so I kind of have that just because I like that. But besides that, I don't have anything. I have a few raw deal decks, I should say. That's about it. So,
well, and I mean, with for me, especially because I'm playing, the absolute most current stuff. Like granted, I have my decks that I go to that are not necessarily tier 1 or anything, but I am constantly building new decks and trying new things online. And then when it comes time for an event, I have to build a new deck anyway. Or at least update the old deck, or like right now, Sith Fury got errataed in the tweak set, and I have Sith Furies and Jedi Levitations also got errataed. And they're floating in all my different decks, and I'm like, I know what it does, and I know if I have to go to an event, I'll have to
change it out,
change that out. But yeah, so I think that's where like it doesn't even matter if you have the stuff together, and also there's people who do have infinite cards perfectly organized, and they'll just build you a deck.
Yeah,
if you wanted to go to an event, you could have Chris Kelly build you a deck, and I'm sure you would,
right?
Or
that's cool.
Or somebody, or Garrett Larson, I know, builds like tons of people's decks.
I was just talking to Garrett today.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah,
good guy.
He builds. He ran nationals last year, and I know he built a bunch of people's decks for nationals. So let's go ahead and turn the corner. This has been a little more loosey goosey of an interview than some of mine, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and turn the corner and go to the Pivo questionnaire. I know that you are familiar with it because you said that you had been writing down potential answers. But for new listeners, this is a question based on James Lipson's Inside the Actors Studio, modified for Star Wars cards. Some of the questions don't make sense. interpret them however you want. Just don't, if I asked for, some of the questions mirror each other. So if I ask for a thing you like, don't say a thing that's not the thing I hate. So first question, what is your favorite card?
Favorite card is Hunt Down and Destroy the Jedi, followed by DVD Lots, Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith.
Very good, very good. What's your least favorite card?
Odds. Inserts, anything that goes in my deck that shouldn't be there.
That's actually that's Matt Sokol's favorite card.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I hate him.
Well, it got him the world championship, so
yeah. I mean, I guess it's different when I've played through these eras where that was so prevalent and all around, right? And Asteroid Sanctuary with odds and, that sort of crap. And you're like, you just want to punch the Decipher designer in the face that did this to us. It's pretty crazy. Anyways.
I'll tell Jerry you said that.
Yeah, right.
What types of this kind of answers the next question? What types of cards make you want to quit the game?
Yeah, anything that changes me from what my deck strategy should be, where I'm having to pivot to a nth degree. That's kind of taking away the interaction or kind of the base concept of what should be happening when you're creating an alternative atmosphere for where the game should be. And kind of playing out of bounds with it, that's where I don't like that aspect.
Okay. What types of cards stimulate your creativity?
I love the whole idea of, I always love Magic, the Millstone deck. I love direct damage. So I love playing Sly, Red Burn, Howling Mine type style of Magic. And so for Star Wars, I love direct damage. I love things that would, kind of speed up the game in a way where it's putting pressure on both of you to get things done instead of making it slow. What's the Dagobah rare? I'm trying to think of it, where you can spend 2 to make your opponent to use a force. It's a dark side rare. Broken concentration.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think is just a cool idea where you're kind of messing with your opponent, or the card Fear, where you're making them choose to lose a force either from their deck or 2 from hand. Anything that kind of dings at your opponent. Like in wrestling, I love Chris Jericho, where you could discard a card to make your opponent discard a card. I like that stuff.
So that's really interesting you say that, because that's that's kind of what No Idea does, especially back in the day when it was doing 2 damage a turn.
Right.
It was doing that. And 2 is a lot more than 1.
Yeah.
It adds up.
I guess my problem with that was I didn't know how to work with it to counter it. With Hunt Down, I knew what the rules were to get around it, or bring him before me. All those have a direct damage, but there's a clear a way to get around it. With that light side build, I was like, how do I stop this?
Yeah. And it also, it got eroded because it was too strong, so you can't stop it. But
Honor the Jedi and Imperial something from Hoth with the Stormtrooper. Can't think of it. Those stop things like Hunt Down as well, or that direct damage. So there's definitely ways to get around it. But that's anyways.
Yeah. No. I just it's just interesting because you brought up. So it sounds like it was more of the issue was more rather than it being a fundamental design issue. It was just a learning curve issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. I understand that. I just because specifically that's what I liked about No Idea was that it put a clock on your at when it was doing the 2 damage. It put a clock on your game. You're steadily draining, and it really did force your opponent to, and the Hunt Down would be great with this, to just fight. You're stacking it. You're stacking at the data vault. Where your guy is, and you just fight.
There's no negative for the light side though to play that style either though, right? Because with dark side, at least with Hunt Down, you have to get Vader down and quick, otherwise you're continuing to take that damage. Light side's not taking a damage with that, and there's no way for them to be penalized for playing that style besides being forced to the deck constraints, right?
The penalty is they can't play Jedi.
Right.
And,
it's a deck
and
constraints based around it.
Yeah, and they don't get they have to play a lot of crappy characters. That's the
right.
That's the real penalty. But no, it was obviously it was overpowered at the time. But that specific interaction of the putting a clock on the game, I really liked. And I like Huntdown too. I like Huntdown pinging both players equally. I like playing a mains deck like a light side mains deck versus Huntdown, and you have to like think like, do I even want to cancel Visage?
Yeah.
Like
because it's hurting both of us.
Both players equally. I love those. I love that. I love those matchups. What is your favorite Star Wars term?
My favorite term is when Vader is talking to Luke and he says, "Sister, Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me." I just love that. My dad used to always say that and be like, "Sister," like he'd just say it really funny. So that's always like my favorite Star Wars term.
What opponent's deck do you love to see?
I love to see kind of unique stuff. Like, show me WAP, right? Like, give me the WAP start or invasion or Watto. I mean, Watto I love and hate. I think it's probably one of the most underrated format. I don't know how it plays in the current meta, but like it's so powerful and like it really can be. So I love to see stuff like that where you're like, this is going to be interactive. I know how to slow it down. I know how to like go to it, like what the clear rules on how they flip. So I got to stop that. Like, I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah. I do like how Watto changes the rules. But
right.
in a way that you can, you're playing a different game. I like playing mains decks or like straightforward fighting decks. So sometimes it is interesting when I can react to my opponent's style. Travis, who I play with every week, has a Watto deck that he doesn't have a clue how to play. So I always like playing against that. What opponent's deck do you hate to see?
Watch your step. for basically the reason you said earlier, it was a deck style that was just so all around for the longest time once Decipher ended the game, or at the end of Decipher's game, and then to start the PC era. I mean, Watch Your Step was still strong for years in the PC era. I mean, Brian Fred was known for that with his little like guys that would go in the patrol crafts, and get the Palace Raiders and get the extra Destiny. That was like what he was known for to play. The other decks I would say are the Death Star 2 decks. I had stopped playing around Endor and didn't play Death Star 2 era. And so like Bring Them Before Me and the other side of that, I can't remember what There's Good in Him. I just don't really know the strategies of playing it or playing against it very well. Mm-hmm. There's a Worlds in where were we? We were in Minnesota, and I was matched up against Desai. Probably one of the first times I'd ever been that high at the table with some of these top players. And he broke out his Bring 'Em Before Me, and it was the light side. There's Good in Him, and he starts as Luke on the table. I'm like, I don't know how to play against this, man. Like, you're gonna just crush me. Like, 1, because you're a great player. 2, I'm a little intimidated because you're a great player, and 3, because I don't know how this deck runs to be able to counter it. There's some decks that you have reps against that the ins and outs of. You played it, you know how to play against it, weaknesses, strengths, and then there's other decks where you're like, I've never really played this. I don't know what it's like. I don't know how to beat it. That sort of thing. That's how those two definitely are for me.
That's so funny because I'm the absolute opposite. I love both those decks. I think they're the most straightforward. It's like
really
the most straightforward matchup. You got both of them. You just fight.
I think I got his I think I had my Lord Emperor down and Lord Vader down and my Emperor down, and I had Luke in hand, and I'm like, I don't know what I do now. Like, I'm taking pings because I have him captured and I don't know what to do with them. It was really funny. So
well, yeah, you make sure Vader captures him if you can. But again, the downside of that deck is that then they don't get to play with Luke, and you deploy to the docking bay, so it messes up their activation, and I think actually I like both of those decks a lot. Bring It Before Me has been very good recently, but you have to. I've been kind of trying to teach Travis that the thing about Bring Him Before Me is that you don't usually actually try to turn Luke. Like, you just want to fight.
Right.
It's just a good platform for fighting. And then when you win battles, you make them lose an extra force, basically, because they're stacking a card. And
right.
same thing with There Is Good in Him. You're just winning battles and doing more damage. And sometimes, and I mean, because if you win 4 battles in a game, you probably won the game anyway.
Yeah.
If you just keep winning, that's
sure.
That's the trick. And then if you're playing against them, you stop them from winning. That's the strategy. Make them not win. All right. What Star Wars job would you like to try?
So I thought about this for a while, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, this is going to sound a little out there, but I'd love to be the propaganda person for the Empire or Rebellion. That's like coming up with like how to tell people like, this is how things are now, and you're going to live this way. Isn't this great? Aren't we all happy right now? Like I thought about that. I'm like, wouldn't that be kind of like a good job? Like, you're kind of setting the rules for what the new society will look like. And you're then telling people like how they can be happy. I'm like, this is like 1984 style, the book, like you're telling the people what to think. And you see that in like Andor and some of these shows. And I'm like, that'd be interesting if that was your job. So anyways, I figure you're not going to have anyone else mention that as like the thing they'd like to do.
Maybe. You'd be surprised. We got some good answers. Yeah,
I was like either that or like the pod racer announcer. That would be cool. Like that sort of thing. Or like, the coding they have on these old, like what looks like 80s equipment. I'm like, you could learn like C++ and be a programmer in that time period. It seems like, so you wouldn't have to like know exotic code.
What Star Wars job would you want to avoid?
All right. So avoid definitely the one in Andor where it's like the ISB person just looking at data all day. Like that would be miserable in that little cubicle where he's just like, sit here and like calculate and look at data. I'm like, oh, that looks like some real jobs today. And I'm like, no, thank you. So, yeah.
And finally, if you were all powerful and could have anything happen, what would you like to see with the future of the game?
So if 3PO was saying, thank the maker, and that maker was me.
Right. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something grandiose and hyperbolic. I've not been. Sometimes when I use the hyperbole too much, it confuses my guest. So if anything could happen, what would you like to see with the future of the game?
I really like where the PC's at now. I think moving forward, what I'd like to see is them be able to print out cards with like some of these different sites that do cards and send out more physical cards to people. So like fully virtualize the sets and say like, hey, we'll get it printed and ship it to you, and it costs $5 per set or something like that. I know there's a whole like licensing with
right. Yeah, like obviously we can't do that legally, but
legally you can't do that.
If you could do anything, yeah.
Right. If I could do anything though, that's where I'd go, because it would be great to have cards back in hand again, while also being able to still play it. And I think the PC is doing a great job with it for the most part. And I'd like to support them and see them continue on with it. And I think that's the way to do it. And you see this with Black Chancery. They've kind of got the rights back for Vampire: The Eternal Struggle. And they're re-releasing, earlier sets and reprinting them and sending out starter decks and kind of like boxes or packs sort of thing, where it's good, and distributors and stores can order this and sell it. And so it's kind of cool because they're able to reprint the older stuff, but while also printing new stuff as well. And so I think that if that's where the PC could go, I'd love to see something like that where, if you're a store owner like Tom Haid, who has 2 stores and I think a third one on the way, or has a third one open, like that, if he could say like, hey guys, like come buy these new PC era Star Wars CCG cards, and people could come buy, a full set, I think it'd be really cool. So that's where I would take it moving forward is in that direction if I had the ability to do so. But I'm sure
I saw that the Netrunner card game had an article that was going around the internet where they had sort of done that, like basically utilizing print on demand services to print their new cards while still saying print and play proxy is legal and everything. I mean, because there are those services do exist.
The Middle Earth group that puts out like sets, they basically make you sign a waiver that's like, we're making this many sets, and if you sell it, we're going to come after you in whatever terms. But they're like, if you don't want it anymore, you have to sell it as a full set to someone else that will then get it, and it's like for the same price you bought it for, sort of thing. It's kind of an interesting way that they're doing it, where they're trying to stay within legal terms of it while keeping it very small.
They're trying to get the fair use. Yeah. That seems like like somebody got creative, and it's like, well, technically we did something. We're trying to make it so that it's less illegal.
So there was a seller of WWE Raw deal cards where they were selling the virtual cards that they made for the game, and you could go to their site and buy them, and they're basically charging you a service fee for having them made and then shipping them to you. And the community was really split on that. Some people loved it because it was an easy way to get the cards they wanted, while other people hated it. Obviously it was illegal technically because they didn't have license rights to it. Right. And so it really was really interesting once it finally got legally shut down for the most part. And so obviously we can't do that with Star Wars, but I mean, that's, if I could redo, if I could have power of it, that's what I would do.
Yeah. If you could figure out a way to do it legally. Yeah. That's like, it makes me think, did you ever see the show Bored to Death? It was an HBO show where Jason Schwartzman played a private detective.
Okay.
It's, first of all, if you haven't seen it, it's great.
I haven't.
But he puts an ad on Craigslist and he says, private detective, my rate's $100 a day plus expensives. I'm not licensed. And he tells people in the beginning in the first season, he's like, he says this a lot. He says, no, I'm not licensed, but I say that in the ad, so it's less illegal.
Right. It's less illegal. That's right. Yeah. I'm not giving you financial advice, but if I were you, this is what I'd do. Right. Like it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, the tough thing with that is you can kind of do it on the sly. A lot of those sites kind of obey copyright to a certain degree. But it makes it so much easier if you have physical cards in hand that you can play with. Like you're talking about how, you have the older version of some of the cards that you're going to have to swap out. And so then it's like print it out, cut it and paste it, and not paste it, but put it back in and out of a sleeve. And if you could just say like, hey, I'm going to send this off in a week, I'm going to get the updated versions in, and it's a card, that'd be so nice, and
well, I don't think that's how that would work if it was print on demand services, but that's you're kind of talking about something else, but because the problem would be if you got print on demand, and you printed out your deck and then they made an errata, you would have to get 60 copies of that card. Right. Yeah. Oh man. Or just have it come in the Scry magazine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I love it. I'll post, some of those old Inquest cards places, like the Schwartz one, and people will be like, that's a fake card, take that down. And I'm like, not a fake card. Inquest printed it. Decipher was okay with it. Everybody gave approval at that time. We're good, guys. It's kind of funny. So,
yeah.
Oh, I'd also do if I had all the power, I'd make like a Unfinity type set, like how Magic has their like funny sets. I'd definitely do that for Star Wars. Yeah. Throw in Spaceballs as part of it, throw in other funny things. I'd love it. The Donnie and Marie special with Star Wars characters on it, the holiday special, all of that. Put it all in there.
So when I interviewed Jerry Darcy, he told me the reason that they weren't able to do Spaceballs was that George Lucas told Mel Brooks, you can do this. We won't give you a hard time about this Star Wars parody as long as you don't do merchandising.
Right.
Since then, I read Mel Brooks's autobiography, and Mel Brooks told that story that
interesting.
That he met with George Lucas. He didn't obviously wasn't talking about Star Wars cards. He was talking about action figures.
Sure.
But literally, he said that George Lucas told him, you can't make action figures. You can't do any merchandising, or
right.
it'll be too similar and we'll come after you. Thanks a lot for coming on, Scott. This was a lot of fun. And everyone else, make sure if you have not checked out Top 8 with Corran and Batmouse on the it's on the podcast feed probably like right before this. It's fun, and we got another episode coming up here soon where we are going to discuss the top 8 keywords from Appendix C of the AR. So until next time, good luck, have fun, and no reverts. This podcast is a production of the Kendallcast Podcast Network. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Kendallcast or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at kendallcast.ninja. Thanks for listening.